I checked my inbox 3 times, then the trash folder. Nothing. No invite, no typo. Just silence. The snow outside my window blurred the world into white noise matching the quiet hum inside my apartment. A mug of tea sat untouched beside my laptop's steam long gone. I stared at the screen at Ethan's newest Instagram post, the family living room aglow with golden lights, the tree practically bursting with gifts. Diana stood in her usual emerald green, Ethan beside her, his smile dazzling. No one looked like they remembered I existed. I closed the app, heart sinking. Maybe it was a mistake. I opened my email again, scrolled, searched, even checked the spam folder. Nothing. No subject line bearing Whitmore Christmas Eve dinner, no passive-aggressive RSVP reminder. I even typed in Rachel and holiday, as if that might unearth a glitch. Still nothing. "You always make things too dramatic," my mother once told me, a phrase that echoed louder every December. Last year during dinner, I made the mistake of defending myself, or at least my work. The painting above the fireplace titled Winter's Grace was mine. I painted it down to the last glint of frost on the pine needles. But Ethan had submitted it to his firm's charity auction without my permission signed. Only EW Diana waved off my concern. "It's all in the family," she said, lifting her wine glass like a queen dismissing the court jester. Back then, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. Now, with no invitation, no message, not even a courtesy call, it felt like deliberate exclusion. I opened a blank message in my drafts. "I hope the wine tastes better without guilt," I typed. But I didn't send it. What was the point? A knock at the door startled me. It was nearly 6, already dark. The UPS man handed me a padded envelope. "E. Whitmore?" he asked. I blinked. "I think that's a mistake, but I'll take it." Inside, I found a thick, glossy flyer. A commemorative edition for a gallery showcase, Christmas Day, December 25th. My fingers froze when I saw the title. Silent Pines. The cover displayed a familiar scene, a pine grove under snow dappled in moonlight, a fox mid-step in the shadows. That brushstroke. That's mine. From a sketch I never showed anyone. The sharp chill of the apartment crept into my skin as I stared at the flyer, unable to process what I was seeing. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, not from cold, but from something far older and deeper, disbelief braided with fury. Silent Pines wasn't just a scene I'd once imagined, it was a memory. The twisted branch in the background, the exact hue of twilight I'd mixed by accident one stormy evening. No one could have recreated that. Unless they had seen the sketchbook I kept hidden in my dresser, the one Ethan had once mockingly flipped through when I wasn't home. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled the old notebook from behind a stack of oncology journals. Page 13? Yes. The fox, the snow, the shading. Identical. I hadn't even finished it. But somehow Ethan had. Publicly. Gloriously. My lips curled in a bitter smile. A second post went up on his profile as I watched, "So proud to bring Silent Pines to the Denver Gallery this Christmas. Art speaks when words fall short." He even quoted me. My own line from a high school essay he once read aloud to tease me. Rage bubbled up fast and bitter. Dr. Patel called around 7, reminding me of the holiday potluck tomorrow. "You okay?" she asked after a pause. "You sound off." I wanted to tell her everything, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I said, "Just tired. Long week." After we hung up, I sat for a long time in the dark, the flyer clutched like evidence. This wasn't a simple omission anymore. This was theft. Camouflaged by blood ties and buried under years of polished lies. It wasn't just about a party. It never was. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not another unsent email. This time it was a document, a timeline, dates, sketch versions, copies of file names. If he was bold enough to exhibit my work, I'd be bolder. This time, I wouldn't let silence win. I didn't mind being invisible until someone else wore my shadow like it was theirs. The university cafe smelled like burnt espresso and acrylic paint. It was tucked into the side of the fine arts building, a haven for over-caffeinated students and half-finished masterpieces. I hadn't stepped foot in there since my undergrad days, but the memory of its cluttered charm hit me like muscle memory. I didn't expect to find Camille behind the counter, hair swept into a messy bun, a graphite smudge on her wrist like a quiet badge of honor. She glanced up from restocking the oat milk and blinked in surprise. "Rachel." I gave a small wave, not trusting my voice just yet. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year, not since Ethan paraded her at Thanksgiving like she was his newest award. I didn't dislike her. In fact, that was part of the problem. "I thought you worked days at the gallery," I said as I approached the counter. "I do," Camille replied, pouring a flat white with practiced grace. "But I pick up extra shifts here when I need clarity. Something about the buzz of anxiety and creative dread keeps me focused." We laughed. It was the kind of laugh that knew its boundaries. "You still painting?" she asked, sliding the drink toward me. Sometimes, I said too quickly. I took a sip to buy time. "You always. Though now it's mostly for my thesis." Harold's breathing down my neck about cohesion. "You know how he is." I nodded, even though I didn't. Professor Harold was legendary among art grads, a purist, difficult to please, and fiercely territorial about originality. Camille glanced at the door behind me. "Funny, I was just talking to Ethan last night about your stuff." I blinked. "My stuff?" "Well, not yours. Specifically just how he said you got him into art. He's really taken off lately, huh?" There was something light in her tone, but her eyes flicked upward, observing me too closely. "He's changed styles recently," I offered, feigning interest. She nodded. "Yeah, it's kind of wild. His early stuff was all geometric tension, hard lines. This year, way more atmospheric. Dreamlike, even. Almost like someone else's voice," I said before I could stop myself. Camille tilted her head. "Exactly. But hey, sometimes inspiration strikes from strange places, right?" I stirred my drink, pretending the foam needed adjusting. "I once had a piece plagiarized," she said, matter of fact. "My sophomore year. I'd posted a charcoal series on this anonymous blog. Weeks later, I saw one of my sketches down to the smudges on a gallery flyer in Soho. Different names, same bone structure. I couldn't prove it, but it gutted me. Something silent broke. I froze. My fingers tensed around the cup. After that," she continued, "I started cataloging everything. Photos, timestamps, even scans of pencil roughs. Harold says it's obsessive, but it keeps me sane." That sounds smart. I meant it. More than I could say for myself. She leaned on the counter, lowering her voice. "Ethan's got a show coming up, you know. Christmas Day." "He didn't tell you." I shook my head. She didn't seem surprised. "It's at the Denver Gallery," she went on. "He's showing this new piece, Silent Pines. Have you seen it?" My breath caught. The name slammed into me like cold water. My grip loosened and the cup tilted dangerously. "Whoa," Camille said, straightening. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I had. My own. "Merry Christmas. This year, your name is Other." The fluorescent lights hummed with indifferent rhythm as I walked the sterile corridors of Boulder Community Hospital. Tinsel drooped from the bulletin boards. Paper snowflakes taped to windows wilted at the corners. Somewhere down the pediatric wing, a nurse played Jingle Bell Rock from a Bluetooth speaker. I moved through it all like a silhouette behind frosted glass, barely there. I hadn't slept much. Camille's text still haunted my mind, a photo of the exhibit preparations, Silent Pines mounted in gilded elegance. The signature in the corner didn't scream Ethan's usual scrawl, it looked hesitant. But the outline was unmistakably mine. Last Christmas flashed across my mind like a cruel rerun, Ethan, drink in hand, introducing me to a gallery investor as the nurse who paints on the side. Not his sister. Not the person who stayed up with him sketching compositions until dawn. just the accessory to his spotlight. I walked into the staff lounge for a short break, pretending I was thirsty, pretending I wasn't checking the wall-mounted television. But I was. And there he was. Ethan sat beside a well-known local anchor dressed in a blazer just casual enough to look artistic. He was speaking about Silent Pines, his voice calm, rehearsed. It's a personal piece, he said, about grief, about isolation and how the natural world reflects what we carry inside. I lost someone a few years ago, and this came out of that darkness. I stared. He lost someone. He meant me. Dr. Patel's voice startled me. Rachel, you okay? I blinked. My face felt flushed. I'm fine, just dehydrated. You look pale. Take your break seriously. I will. He gave me a long look and left. I sat down at the table, phone in hand. Camille had sent another message. Camille thought you'd want to see it before it opens officially. Don't tell Ethan. The attached image was clearer this time. Silent Pines hung under focused gallery lights. I pinched the screen to zoom in. The composition, a winding path through dense birch trees, was mine. Every nuance. The exact sketch I'd once hidden inside a locked notebook, the one I never showed anyone. Except Ethan. Once. Drunkenly. Years ago. His name was etched faintly in the corner, but the brushwork betrayed the lie. A call light blinked red in room 204. I stood and walked briskly down the hall. Inside, an elderly woman sat upright, confused, clutching the edge of her blanket. Sweetheart, she whispered. What's your name again, Rachel? I said softly, adjusting her oxygen line. She smiled. You look like someone I knew. Rachel? Rachel? Then her face clouded over. I'm sorry, dear. What was your name again? I froze for a breath. Rachel, I repeated. But it's okay. I stayed with her a moment just to steady my heartbeat. She reminded me of my grandmother, the one who taught me to draw, who once said art is memory made visible. Now even memory didn't recognize me. I finished my shift an hour late. My scrub smelled of antiseptic and too much time. The world outside was glittering white snow falling like confetti for a party I wasn't invited to. At home, the apartment felt smaller, colder. I scrolled through the family contact group chat. Diana had sent another photo, this one of the dinner table. Cranberry glaze candles matching sweaters. Ethan at the head carving roast beef like a prince. No mention of me. I opened the group details. My thumb hovered for a second, then tapped, Leave group. A final text to no one. Merry Christmas to you too. Then delete. It wasn't the snow that chilled me. It was the applause for someone who didn't bleed for it. Outside my apartment window, the world was frosted in silence. Cars slowed down along Pine Street, kids tumbled in fresh snow, and somewhere beyond my reach, the people I used to call family were dressed in black and velvet, sipping champagne beneath a gallery skylight. I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on a pillow, watching the live stream of Ethan's exhibit unfold in high definition. Camera pans revealed a sea of guests gathered around Silent Pines, nodding as if they understood grief etched into paint. Ethan stood by the piece, smiling softly, modest in his tailored suit. The spotlight flattered him, haloed him even. I turned up the volume just as a reporter asked Diana how it felt to have raised such a gifted son. Talent runs in the family, she said, lips painted red and precise. Ethan's always been the quiet genius. He's been creating since he was 5. I stared at the screen, frozen. The camera flicked briefly to the painting. Even pixelated, I could see the echoes of my lines, the way the fog clung to the trees, the path our grandmother's trail behind her house rendered in my memory, first, then my ink. Camille's message buzzed on my phone. Is this really his? I didn't answer. Instead, I stood and walked to the closet. The top shelf was stacked with cardboard boxes marked Art School Sketches Grandma's. My fingers trembled as I tugged one down the cardboard, cold against my palms. I hadn't opened this box in years. Beneath dried petals and charcoal smudges, I found the red journal. The spine cracked like an old knuckle when I flipped it open. Grief had hollowed me that year. I had spent weeks drawing instead of sleeping. Silent Pines was born from those nights. The sketch was on page 43, labeled in my handwriting RW 2015. Below that, a quote from my grandmother: "Trees remember the ones who walk among them even when people forget." I touched the edge of the page. The trees, the mist, the brushwork now celebrated under Ethan's name. Every stroke bore my silence, my sorrow. The phone buzzed again. Camille. He's answering questions now. Says the piece was inspired by a hiking trip. Sounds off. I took a breath. This was no longer about bitterness. This was theft, and silence was its accomplice. I picked up my phone and typed slowly, "I need to show you something. In person." Then hit send. My hands were still shaking when I set the journal down on the kitchen counter, as though even touching it again reopened something that had been sutured poorly. The snow outside thickened, quieting the world like gauze over a wound. But inside me, noise built sharp, discordant, urgent. I tried to eat, but couldn't stomach it. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and watched the replay of the live stream. A critic leaned toward the painting and murmured something about emotional restraint and haunting melancholy. Words meant for my pain, now worn like cologne by someone else. Ethan stood there fielding questions, his hands gesturing vaguely like the idea had just come to him. I knew those gestures. He used to make them in high school when bluffing a presentation. Some things never changed. The camera caught Diana again, standing just behind Ethan. Her hand brushed his shoulder with maternal pride, a silent gesture that cut deeper than any insult. It said, "This is my child. My only success." I turned away. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection didn't flinch. That more than anything unsettled me. I should have been crying. I should have been pacing, screaming. But instead, I was calm, cold. Camille responded again. "Tomorrow, I'm off work afternoon." My fingers hovered, then typed, "Come at 1. I'll explain everything." I added a photo of the sketchbook page before I could hesitate, the signature clear, the style undeniable. The response came faster than I expected. Holy shit. The silence afterward was a strange kind of comfort. Camille knew, and that meant I wasn't invisible anymore. I curled back onto the couch, the wine untouched, the sketchbook on my chest like armor. Outside, the snow kept falling, but this time it didn't fall on his name. It fell on mine, and I was ready to reclaim it. I closed the laptop, letting the darkness of the room settle around me. No more watching. No more silence. Tomorrow I would step out of the background. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. You don't tear down a house with a storm. You pull a single thread and let it collapse on its own. Camille's apartment was warmer than mine, scented faintly of clove and bergamot with woolen throws arranged just so across the couch. Outside, dusk fell in blue strokes, and the silence between us was tight, anticipatory. She made tea, but we barely touched it. Instead, we sat cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook spread open like evidence in a quiet courtroom. "This one," I said, tapping the journal. Page 43. Silent Pines. Dated. Signed. Before Ethan ever started painting seriously, Camille leaned in, brows knitting. She didn't speak for a while. Her fingers hovered over the sketch like they might smudge something sacred. "I recognize this curve," she murmured. "The line that mimics the fog that's yours, Rachel. I've seen you use it in your other pieces." I nodded. She opened her tablet and scrolled through photos from Ethan's online portfolio. Piece after piece bore the same rhythm: trees with blurred roots. Grief lines etched into trunks like trauma tattoos. They didn't speak Ethan. They spoke me. "There's more," Camille said, her voice low. "His last 2 pieces. They mimic this grief line technique you use." I didn't notice until now. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. I don't want to make this a spectacle, I said. It's not about revenge. Camille looked up. It's about truth and protection. You think you're the only one he might have stolen from. She unlocked a file she had saved from the department's exhibit last year, digital scans of student submissions, including Ethan's. She opened one and zoomed in slowly. Nothing at first. Just a landscape. Muted, melancholic, beautiful. Wait, she whispered. Here. A flick of filters. A shift in contrast. Beneath the main layer in faint gray, almost ghosted, was a mark. RW. That's not his signature, she said. No, I said. It's mine. We sat there in a silence that felt heavier than truth. Camille's eyes widened, not with shock anymore, but resolve. He didn't just steal your art, she said quietly. He tried to erase you. That line hung in the air between us like frost on a window pane. I stared down at the tablet at the fading outline of my initials buried beneath Ethan's carefully curated edits. The audacity wasn't just in the theft, it was in the burial. He hadn't merely wanted credit. He wanted to blot me out like I had never existed. I kept thinking I imagined it. I admitted. I thought maybe I was being petty. You're not, Camille said. You were gaslit. I looked up at her, the flicker of something unspeakable in my chest. Not rage, not yet, but the shape of something sharp, something alive. Camille opened a drawer and pulled out a hard drive. If I could borrow a high-res scan from Ethan's collection, I know where he stores backups. I can check the metadata. Sometimes artists forget to scrub them. If your name's in there? I don't want to drag this into the open, I said quickly. Not yet. She didn't flinch. Then we'll stay in the shadows. For now. We sat for hours. Camille flipped through every page of my journal, cross-referencing brushstroke styles, emotional cues. She noted every parallel, every repetition. It was surgical. I don't think he even understands what these lines mean, she said once. To him, they're aesthetic. But to you? I nodded. Each one was grief. Each stroke was a heartbeat I couldn't say out loud. Camille's hand trembled when she closed the last page. He doesn't deserve this. He never did. I left her apartment that night with a heavy heart and a flash drive of copies she made tucked deep in my coat pocket. Outside, the snow had thickened. The wind bit at my skin. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel numb. Something had started unraveling. Not loud, not public. But thread by thread, the house was trembling. Back home, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The sketchbook rested beside me on the bed pages still open. I thought about what Camille said about being erased. And I knew then that silence was no longer neutral. Silence was permission. I wasn't ready for war. But I could pull threads. One at a time. Let the house fall on its own. I didn't sign my name, but the world began whispering it anyway. The snowstorm pressed against my apartment windows in thick, whirling sheets. The radiator hissed like it was trying to fill the silence I refused to break. I sat curled on the couch laptop perched on my knees, watching as Camille's blog post lit a quiet fire I never intended to start. It had gone live 2 hours earlier, a study of Silent Pine's influence style and the echo of originality. She hadn't named me, not once. But she didn't have to. Camille had included side-by-side comparisons, Ethan's celebrated painting on one side, a cropped section from my 2015 sketchbook on the other. No initials, no context, just brushstrokes. And it was enough. In the comments section, readers began connecting the dots. These styles are too similar to be coincidence, one wrote. Same emotional tone, same tree patterns. Another chimed in. Wasn't this technique published in a thesis years ago? A third simply asked, who's the real artist here? I refreshed the page again and again, unable to look away. The post was gaining traction, shared by niche art forums, retweeted by alumni from the university's art department, and discussed in Reddit threads where strangers debated authorship like amateur detectives. Camille had included just enough evidence to raise eyebrows, but not enough to ignite legal sparks. She texted me, "Still no name. Still your truth. Just let them see what I see." I didn't reply. The storm outside howled louder, like it knew secrets were being stirred. I poured tea I wouldn't drink and scrolled further, pausing only when I saw a new comment pinned to the top by Camille. "What defines originality? Is it fame? Or the first scar my breath caught?" Ethan hadn't responded publicly, but Camille forwarded me the message he sent privately. "Stop entertaining jealous people. You're smarter than this." It was short, cold, and dripping with the kind of ego that thought silence was a shield. Camille had captioned the screenshot she sent me with one line: "He's nervous." I leaned back, letting the laptop rest against my thighs. I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. Only a slow thrum of disbelief, like watching the tide shift without knowing whether it would flood or recede. Then came the ripple. One of Camille's art contacts, someone who ran a niche Instagram account called Ape Palette Truths, reposted her blog article to their 300,000 followers. They added their own caption, "When inspiration sounds like an echo, who spoke first?" Within minutes, my phone lit up with notifications. Comments rolled in faster now. Artists, critics, anonymous voices. Some called it theft. Some called it coincidence. Others just asked again and again, "Who's the original?" But I stayed quiet. I didn't correct them. I didn't claim. I didn't name. I just watched. Until one final notification came through. Not a comment. Not a message from Camille. An email. Subject: inquiry regarding Silent Pines. From the Colorado Modern Gallery. I read the first line, heart in my throat. "We'd like to talk." They weren't shouting my name, but they were whispering it, and that was enough. The break room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cinnamon air freshener. A radio played soft carols in the background, jarring against the flicker of fluorescent lights. I leaned against the wall, scrolling through my phone with one hand while the other cradled a paper cup of tea that had long since gone cold. It had been 36 hours since Camille's blog post went live. Reddit was aflame. Someone had started a thread in r/r art theft titled "Artist Behind the Art," with screen caps from Camille's post, and the caption, "Too many coincidences here." Beneath it, dozens of comments built a digital autopsy of Ethan's career: old pieces, interviews, stylistic leaps no one had questioned until now. I scrolled until one comment froze me. I interned at the Denver Arts Annex in 2017. Saw a sketch pinned to a back wall, same structure, same trees. It was signed RW, thought it was Ethan's sisters. The username was a throwaway, but it didn't matter. The memory was real. My thumb hovered above the screen. Somewhere in a box under my bed was a folder from that summer containing a rejection letter from the annex. I remembered the sting. I remembered Ethan offering to take a look at my portfolio, saying he had friends in the art world. I stared at the comment. The scar pulsed under the skin. The break room door opened. Dr. Patel stepped in, nodded at me briefly, and walked to the counter. She didn't say anything, just poured herself coffee, added 2 creams stirred, then walked by on her way out. As she passed, she slipped a sticky note onto the table beside me. It read, "You should let it breathe." I looked up, but she was already gone. The note sat between my fingers for minutes. I folded and unfolded it until the paper was soft at the creases. Outside the break room, the hospital bustled, beeping machines, rolling gurneys, clipped voices. But in that small space, something had settled. A shift. I was no longer invisible. Camille texted a screenshot from Instagram. Ethan had just posted a black and white photo of a paintbrush soaked in water, captioned, "Beginning a new chapter, a new series. Stay tuned." The comments flooded in. inspired by the controversy, can't wait to see what truth looks like this time. Will you credit your muse? He wasn't saying anything directly, but that was the loudest silence I'd ever heard from him. Back in my apartment that evening, I curled on the couch with my old laptop. The keys were a little sticky, the screen slightly yellowed. I hadn't opened it in years, not since nursing school. But I remembered vaguely stupidly that I'd once uploaded a few sketches to an old DeviantArt account. For safekeeping, I'd told myself, in case the originals ever got damaged. I typed in a few forgotten usernames, tried a few passwords. Then, there it was. The gallery loaded slowly. 4 uploads, one titled Winter Silence. My heart stopped. I clicked. There, in grainy resolution and untouched by time, was the early version of Silent Pines. A smaller tree line, softer shading, but the composition identical. My initials were in the corner RW. The date stamp read, December 15th, 2015. I stared at the screen like it might vanish if I blinked. It was irrefutable, undeniable. A digital fingerprint left in the open this whole time. Ethan had counted on my silence, but I had already spoken years ago. Quietly, honestly. I hovered over the share button, thought of Camille, thought of Dr. Patel's note. I bookmarked the page. Not yet. I closed the laptop, the image still burning behind my eyes. Then I whispered aloud to no one and everyone soon. That night, as snow continued to fall in heavy silence outside my window, I sat on the floor beside a stack of old sketchbooks and journals. I didn't open them. I just rested my hand on the top one soft leather-worn corners, a faint pencil smudge on the spine. Proofs. Pieces of me. My phone buzzed again. This time, not Camille. An email notification from a curator I barely remembered meeting years ago. The subject line was Simple Silent Pines, a question of origins. They were still whispering, and now I was listening. The louder they clapped, the emptier it sounded. It was the kind of applause that filled a room without touching anything. On screen, the gallery pulsed with artificial warmth, spotlights bouncing off whitewashed walls, champagne flutes sweating in manicured hands, the quiet scuffle of curated boots on polished floors. I watched from the couch, wrapped in a wool blanket, a graphite pencil tracing lazy arcs across the margins of my journal. I wasn't drawing anything in particular, just letting the movement exist. Ethan stood beneath a new canvas. The placard beside it read, Genesis A. Rebirth in Oil. The painting itself, garish reds, overcompensated shadows, and a jagged skyline that tried to scream grief, but only whispered confusion. He wore a dark blazer over a turtleneck, hair swept back, smiling like he'd earned every breath in that room, but they weren't buying it. The critic from Boulder Arts Quarterly hovered near the back, arms crossed. I recognized her from a previous review that had praised Silent Pines as quietly devastating. Now she tilted her head, frowned, and scribbled something without looking up again. I didn't need to hear her. I knew that look. Camille stood near the refreshments table, lips pursed, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't move much, just watched the guests as they wandered, squinting at the new pieces, then drifting toward the older section. The one with work from last year. Rachel-based work. My work. Even watered down, diluted through Ethan's brush, it still held something the new ones didn't. Soul. I caught a shot of Diana in the crowd, her pearls gleaming like an accusation. She stood stiffly beside Ethan, whispering something close to his ear. He nodded too quickly. The camera panned past them, then lingered on a small group gathered around an older piece. Silent Pines hung modestly near the back. A woman in a green coat pointed to it, murmuring something to her companion, who nodded with raised brows. A blogger had already posted on X. The new series lacks continuity, like the artist forgot what grief feels like. Someone else replied, maybe the artist left his muse behind, or maybe he never had one to begin with. I paused the live stream and stared at the comment, letting the words settle like dust on a forgotten windowsill. Camille messaged he's sweating, trying to play it cool. Diana's blaming me now. Lol. Another message followed. They're starting to smell the rot. Ready for the last push, I didn't respond right away. Instead, I turned back to the journal and began sketching in earnest. Not for proof, not for vengeance, for clarity. For the part of me that had once stopped creating because someone else convinced me I didn't deserve the space. I watched Ethan clink glasses with a gallery rep. His smile wavered just enough to catch on the corner of the screen. There was no outrage in me, no vindictive thrill, just quiet detachment. Later that night, art blogs began their slow dissection, a departure from emotional resonance. One headline read, "Technically polished, spiritually absent." Another wrote, "We expected evolution. What we got was mimicry without mystery." Ethan hadn't posted anything since the event. No celebratory captions, no behind-the-scenes stories. Just silence. Camille, on the other hand, uploaded a black-and-white photo of silent pines cropped just shy of the signature framed by falling snow. No caption, just the image. The comments poured in. Still his best. Why does this feel different? Someone else painted this. I can feel it. I didn't answer Camille's last message. Not yet. Instead, I turned off the lights, leaving only the screen's glow behind. On it, Ethan stood in the frame of his own, making perfectly lit, perfectly poised, perfectly hollow. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. And in the silence that followed, I kept sketching lines falling like flurries, one truth at a time. There was a strange peace in watching something crumble without lifting a single finger. No confrontation. No accusation. Just an echo loud enough to drown the lie. And all I had to do was let it breathe. They weren't trying to fix the wound, they were sealing it shut with gold, hoping no one would notice the rot. The email came while I was microwaving a stale muffin in the hospital break room. No subject line, no signature, just a link and 3 words. You should see this. I tapped the link cautiously. A blog post loaded, one of those lifestyle platforms pretending to be journalism. The headline screamed louder than the text needed to mental health and misattributed genius when inspiration becomes delusion. I scrolled down, jaw tight. The article outlined a recent case involving a healthcare worker who claimed to have painted a now famous piece. It described her as emotionally volatile, citing unnamed close sources who hinted at past treatments, therapy sessions, and erratic behavior. There was no name, no explicit accusation, but there didn't need to be. The timeline matched. The hospital title, the gender, the painting. It all pointed like a crooked arrow back at me. My fingers trembled only slightly as I reached for my coffee. Camille called before I could process more. Her voice didn't carry guilt, it carried urgency. "I didn't know she'd go that far," she said before I could speak. "It's Diana. She's using Ethan's PR firm, leaking things through unofficial sources." I sat down slowly, the walls of the break room suddenly too close, too yellow. "How did they get those details?" Camille hesitated. "There's a cousin. Ethan used to crash in her place during college. She worked at the clinic. I think he convinced her to access old files." A hollow thud pulsed behind my ears. It wasn't just theft now. It was violation. The hospital admin knocked lightly on the doorframe, holding a polite but pointed smile. "Rachel, the board's requesting a clarification meeting. Just a formality. Patients are asking questions." I nodded, expression unreadable. "I'll be there." Later in Camille's apartment, I reread the blog. The comments were worse than the article. Why do crazy people always think they're artists? Probably made it all up. Attention seekers are good at rewriting their own memories. Camille paced near the window. We could respond. We could go public, show everything now. I shook my head. Let the fire spread. Smoke tells people where to look. Her eyes narrowed. That's terrifyingly calm of you. I'm not calm, I said. I'm done begging for dignity. Night settled like bruises on the city. The snow hadn't stopped, but now it felt cosmetic, something laid over deeper, dirtier terrain. Camille dug through her saved screenshots while I traced the outline of silent pines in my journal hand, moving more from memory than intent. They're trying to drown it out, she muttered. Flood the conversation before your version gets traction. I almost smiled. Let them. She turned toward me, incredulous. You're seriously okay with being slandered? No, I said. But I'm not okay with fighting it on their terms. Another message lit up Camille's phone. She read it, then handed it over to me without comment. A forwarded email chain between Ethan and a PR consultant subject line, undermine quietly. They listed talking points. Discredit without naming. Suggest therapy. Mention emotional fragility. Keep it vague but suggestive. I stared at the screen long enough for my eyes to dry out. He's not just scared of losing credit, I said quietly. He's scared I'll be believed. That's when I knew we were closer to the end than the beginning. They'd thrown fire hoping I'd burn or run, but embers aren't afraid of flames. At home that night, I opened the email from the hospital board and reread the language. Polite concern masked as professionalism, reputational sensitivity masquerading as procedure. I typed a short response. I'm available for the meeting. I understand your position. I ask for equal understanding of mine. I didn't send it yet. Instead, I opened the folder Camille had made our digital dossier. Metadata comparisons, signature overlays, time-stamped DeviantArt screenshots, photographs of my 2015 sketchbook. Camille had tagged each one with quiet fury. Truth had never felt so organized. I scrolled back to the earliest entry, an image of Silent Pines, barely finished, labeled RW Original 2015 JPG. There was no blood on the canvas. But this was how I bled. Not in public, not in performance. In layers, in light, in brushstrokes no one thought to trace. Until now. They came knocking not with flowers but with fragile apologies wrapped in self-interest. I watched their silhouettes blur behind the frosted glass of my apartment door. Snowflakes clung to Diana's scarf and Ethan's collar like soft accusations. For a long second I considered not answering. Then slowly I opened it, not wide, just enough for winter air and tension to crawl inside. Let's talk, Rachel. Diana said, her tone polished, almost brittle. Her lipstick was perfect, her posture stiffer than the coat she refused to remove. Ethan offered a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. We thought it'd be better in person. I stepped aside without a word. Let them perform. The living room remained unchanged, neutral walls, a modest fir-scented candle still flickering on the windowsill. I hadn't decorated. My apartment had stayed a sanctuary, untouched by ornaments or family tradition. Diana's eyes swept the room like she expected to find evidence of something: loneliness, guilt, maybe misplaced gratitude. Finding none, she settled into the armchair, crossing her legs. Ethan remained standing, hands in his pockets. Look, things have gotten out of hand online, he started. We didn't expect that blog post to blow up like it did. I raised an eyebrow. I mean, he corrected Camille's post. And all the Reddit speculation, people jumping to conclusions. Diana chimed in. This isn't good for anyone, least of all you, Rachel. The scrutiny, the whispers. Don't you want peace? Peace? My voice emerged cooler than the air outside. Yes, she insisted. Family peace. We can't undo everything, but maybe we misunderstood each other. Your sketches, Ethan's vision art, is interpretive, isn't it? I almost laughed. Almost. Ethan shifted uneasily. We wanted to invite you back into the fold. Privately. Before things go further. I leaned back, letting silence stretch. Let them fill it with excuses. You've always been emotional, Diana said delicately. That's not criticism. Just you tend to see betrayal where there isn't any. And you, I replied quietly, tend to call betrayal family business. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rachel, I didn't steal anything. Inspiration flows. It evolves. I built those pieces. Yes, maybe some subconscious influence. You traced my grief, I cut in, and passed it off as your growth. Diana stood up abruptly, voice laced with urgency. This ends now. The public doesn't need to know more. It'll hurt all of us. That's your concern, I said, rising too. Optics. Before either could respond, my phone vibrated on the table. Camille, I answered without hesitation. 3 confirmations, she said. Timestamp verified. They're calling it indisputable. Thank you, I murmured, not caring if Diana or Ethan heard. What's going on? Ethan asked, suspicious. I ended the call and looked him in the eye. You're not here to apologize, I said. You're here to keep what never belonged to you. No one spoke. In the distance, church bells began their 12 count. Midnight. I stepped forward and opened the door wide. Neither moved at first. Rachel, Diana began. But I was already done. As midnight bells rang, I shut the door behind them. I already own the night. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs the silence to be broken. The sun hadn't yet melted the thin layer of frost clinging to my apartment windows when I read Camille's message. It's live, she wrote. 3 words. Simple, surgical, inevitable. I sat at the kitchen table, mug of untouched coffee warming my palm, and clicked the link she had sent. The article opened to a stark black and white banner, brushstroke forensics, a digital dissection of silent pines. Her name was listed at the top, but she'd made the report about evidence, not ego. That was Camille Truth before theatrics. The report was meticulous. Side-by-side metadata comparisons, timestamp breakdowns, zoomed-in brushstroke sequences. She had matched digital scans from Ethan's files against a cached version of my DeviantArt post from 2015-1 with a verified upload time visible sketch layer and my full initials at the bottom, RW. Every page was another pin in the balloon of his narrative. Camille's captions were spare, but surgical. Technique A, first recorded in 2015. Metadata indicates editing began in late 2023. Style inconsistencies suggest derivative adaptation. I wasn't in the spotlight, but my shadows were. Within hours, art bloggers picked it up. Art Murmur, Visual Integrity, even a podcast called The Inspired Lie, featured a segment. They used terms like artistic lineage, plagiarism trail, and parallel inspiration, if generous. Camille had tagged no names, but the scent was unmistakable. People knew who she meant. And Ethan knew. He hadn't issued a statement, but his silence had begun to rot. He changed his profile picture. He archived posts. Camille forwarded me a text from his assistant. Mr. Whitmore won't be taking interviews at this time. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. This is Nina Shore from the Colorado Modern Gallery, the woman said crisply. We're organizing a panel on authorship and provenance in contemporary art. Would you be willing to speak? I paused for too long. Thank you, I said, but I think the evidence is already speaking. The line was quiet, respectful. If you change your mind, the seat is yours. Camille called an hour later, breathless. They want you in a panel. They want to hear you. I'm not ready to be heard, I replied. I'm just ready to be seen. I pulled out my original sketch of Silent Pines, the one I'd found in the journal. I flattened the curled edges, brushed away a fleck of old graphite. My signature stared back at me. RW, 2015. Next to it, my grandmother's scrawl in pencil. Some wounds are landscapes. I scanned it carefully, ensuring resolution and clarity. Then I attached it to an anonymous Reddit post titled "The Real Creator of Silent Pines." I included no backstory, no commentary, just an image. Let the internet do the rest. Within minutes, it was upvoted, then shared, then debated. People compared it to Ethan's exhibit prints, pulling up screen caps, overlays, filters. Someone wrote, "If he didn't copy this, then I'm a toaster." Another commented, "This explains why his new stuff is dead inside." I sat back and watched. The storm had arrived and I hadn't said a word. Camille texted, "It's everywhere now." I replied with a single line, "Let it grow." The gallery blog updated their post, now posing the question outright: was Ethan Whitmore inspired or exposed? A follow-up piece quoted 3 independent art historians who confirmed the sketch predated Ethan's version by at least 7 years. I still hadn't spoken, but the truth had, loudly. It was strange, this shift in gravity. For years, I'd been orbiting a silence I thought was mine to keep. But now that silence was breaking, not with noise, but with resonance. Each piece of evidence echoed louder than any protest could have. I didn't feel vindicated, not yet. Vindication implies recognition. What I felt was the faint hum of restoration of a wrong slowly pulling itself upright like a painting tilted askew. Even Dr. Patel left a sticky note on my locker's solid brushwork. "Proud of you." I smiled for the first time that day. By evening, my inbox was a flood art students asking for interviews, editors requesting statements, former acquaintances suddenly remembering they'd always loved my work. I ignored them all. This wasn't their moment. It wasn't even mine. It was the art's. It was the truth's. I turned off my phone and set it on the windowsill. Snow had begun falling again, powder fine and silent. I leaned back in my chair, the sketch still glowing on my laptop screen. "Let the world decide," I whispered. "My silence has spoken enough." At 9:46 a.m. on the 2nd of January, an anonymous Twitter account posted an internal gallery memo. It wasn't meant for public eyes, typed hastily, redacted awkwardly, but the content was nuclear. "We cannot in good faith continue promoting Ethan Whitmore as the sole originator of the Silent Pines collection, given recent provenance disputes and media attention. Further recommendations pending legal." The gallery's signature was at the bottom. The account tagged every major art outlet and me. I didn't retweet. I didn't comment. I simply refreshed. Again and again, watching numbers spiral upward like a fever. Camille was the one who called first. "It's happening," she whispered, then paused. "They're eating each other alive." I could hear it in her voice, the awe, the horror. She'd seen systems protect their favorites for years. This time, they didn't have time to build the moat. By midday, the backlash had legs. The Denver Chronicle ran a full-page opinion, "When Art Theft Wears a Suit." Another blog, Behind the Easel, published side-by-side comparisons of my DeviantArt sketches and Ethan's visionary pieces. "The identical curvature in the pine lines," one caption read. "The mimicry is undeniable. Ethan hadn't posted in 2 days. But Diana had." Her statement, dressed in flowery ambiguity, dripped with performative concern. "We remain proud of Ethan's accomplishments and his lifelong dedication to art. Any discussion about creative overlap should be handled with nuance, not pitchforks." Attached was a photo of Ethan as a child painting beside a stream. It fooled no one. Comments flooded in like fire ants. "Nuance doesn't erase metadata," one user replied. Another, "Your family's legacy is fraud. Don't hide behind childhood photos." It wasn't just the public now. Anonymous artist collectives, ones Camille had followed for years, began sharing my old work, watermarking it with RW, and tagging every curator they knew. One group overlaid Ethan's Silent Pines with my DeviantArt sketch, morphing them in an animation that ended with "Who really walked through these woods?" I watched it loop 3 times before exhaling. Meanwhile, gallery owners scrambled. Camille forwarded me another leak. Ethan had been pulled from the upcoming Voices of the West National exhibit. Concerns over provenance, the email read. Pending resolution, his slot will remain vacant. Donors began distancing themselves. Articles pivoted. What was once admiration turned into audit. Was Ethan ever the artist we thought he was, the ghost behind his canvas? The silence from Ethan himself grew louder with each refresh. Then came the live stream. It wasn't planned. A critic from Color and Canvas, known for her bluntness, went live. Let's talk about the elephant, or rather the ghost in the gallery. She spoke with surgical calm, drawing out each stolen motif, quoting timestamps showing overlays. They told us Ethan's art was about grief. But what if the grief wasn't his to begin with? She paused, leaning in. I suspect the real artist is still silent, but her silence is saying everything. I sat frozen, phone burning in my hand. A ping cut through my thoughts. Camille's message. You ready to step into the light? Or do I keep speaking for you? My thumb hovered over the screen. 100 replies echoed in my head, but none fit. So I typed only 3 words. Not yet. Almost. When you take what's not yours, the weight eventually breaks your hands. The wind curled through the bare trees around the Whitmore estate, rattling windows like a whispered accusation. Inside the study, Ethan stood with his back to the fireplace, his jaw tight and fists clenched. Diana, seated across from him in a navy velvet armchair, sipped her coffee without meeting his eyes. You were supposed to protect me, he hissed. Diana set the porcelain cup down gently, her movements deliberate. I protected the family name, she said. That was the job. Ethan paced the soles of his polished shoes, thudding against the antique rug. You think I care about the name now? They're pulling my work from galleries. I lost 3 sponsors today. You built a house of cards? She murmured. Don't blame the breeze. Outside the door, Camille lingered in silence, hearing the brittle conversation unfold. When she finally entered, she didn't look at Ethan. Instead, she set a box on the side table. Ethan's sketchbooks, unopened, untouched, returned like artifacts from a failed excavation. I'm not angry, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of disappointment. Just done. Ethan turned, eyes flaring. You believe her? After everything I believe? Evidence, she replied. And I believe silence is sometimes the loudest confession. She walked out without slamming the door. That would have implied rage. What she left behind was worse, finality. Later that evening, Rachel sat in her apartment, surrounded by faint smells of turpentine and snow. The light from her desk lamp cast long shadows across her sketch pad, where an early version of a new piece had started to emerge, branches breaking through a gilded frame, as if nature were reclaiming something stolen. Her phone buzzed. An official email from the Colorado Modern Gallery. She scanned it, heart calm, hands steady. We are pleased to feature your piece Silent Pines in our January series titled Reclaimed. She read the line twice before exhaling slowly. No dramatic outburst. No victory dance. Just quiet resolution. She placed the phone face down and turned to her grandmother's easel-stained chipped sacred. Meanwhile, Ethan attempted to salvage what little remained. Desperate, he created burner accounts and began sowing doubt about Camille's credibility on obscure forums. But the internet was less forgiving than he'd expected. Users cross-referenced his IP. Screenshots emerged. His name began trending not for art, but for pettiness. Diana's press manager tried to soften the headlines, offering donations to local schools, but the tide had turned. Public opinion wasn't just slipping, it was crashing. Her legacy, once pristine, now reeked of complicity. She booked a flight to the East Coast under the pretense of health recovery, but the headlines told another story. Rachel didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Consequence had its own choreography, and it was dancing on time. In the stillness of her apartment, she lit a small candle beside her grandmother's easel. The flame flickered in rhythm with her breath, steady and alive. Outside, snow continued to fall, each flake an echo of a voice that once told her, real justice doesn't shout. She smiled softly. She'd be laughing now. January 4th arrived with a calm stillness that felt like exhale after a long-held breath. The kind of cold that didn't bite but reminded you to wrap yourself gently. Outside Boulder Community Hospital, the snow drifted slowly past the windows, soft and unhurried, settling into quiet corners like secrets too heavy to rise. Inside a modest conference room repurposed for healing, Rachel adjusted a stack of drawing pads on the central table. She wore a soft gray cardigan that once belonged to her grandmother, its sleeves slightly too long, its warmth familiar. Around her, patients filed in one by one, each carrying something invisible, but heavy: trauma, confusion, grief. Most had never held a paintbrush in years. The room didn't echo with conversation, but it breathed. Dr. Patel stopped by, briefly delivering a small kettle of herbal tea and a nod. "You're really building something here," he said, his voice quiet. "They talk about this room when they think we're not listening." Rachel smiled, watching a young woman trace circles in yellow chalk. "It's not about making art," she replied. "It's about remembering you still can." She moved from table to table, offering guidance without pressure. One patient, an older man who'd barely spoken all week, surprised her by painting a river with red trees along its banks. Another drew a series of broken picture frames, one of them mended with gold lines, like kintsugi. By noon, she began mounting the finished works on the corkboard wall in the main lobby. No signatures, no captions, just expressions. She pinned a small hand-lettered sign above the collection, "Healing Through Creation," a community exhibit. Visitors paused to look. Some smiled, others wiped their eyes. While Rachel arranged the final piece, a watercolor bird flying out of a storm, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. The email subject line read, "Reclaimed Art and Justice Speaker Confirmation." She tapped it open. The invitation was official. She was listed as the closing speaker at a New York panel discussing authorship ethics and restorative justice in the art world. Her name was printed clearly, centered on the flyer attached to the PDF. She sat down quietly in the nearest chair, rereading the message. The weight of it wasn't fear anymore. It was responsibility. Being seen meant standing for something beyond herself. That evening at home, Rachel made a cup of tea she never finished. The steam curled upward and vanished. She pulled out a sketchbook, one of the early ones worn at the spine, and tucked a note inside. Camille. There are letters we write only to understand ourselves. Thank you for not just speaking for me, but with me. You listened when I was drowning in silence. That mattered more than any headline. She didn't seal the letter, didn't address it. She closed the book gently and slid it back onto the shelf. Later that night, she opened a padded archival envelope and laid the original Silent Pines sketch inside, signed R.W., 2015 in faded ink. She wrote the address slowly: National Archive of Modern American Artists. This wasn't a claim, it was a return. Before bed, she set up the small tripod and camera in her studio nook beside her new canvas. The gallery rep had requested a simple biography video, just a few sentences. Rachel pressed record. The red light blinked once, steady and waiting. She met her own reflection in the lens. My name is Rachel Whitmore, and I remember everything. I never needed their stage. I just reclaimed my own silence. The gallery's overhead lights poured down like soft snowfall, gentle, unwavering, casting no shadows. The room wasn't large, but it pulsed with quiet expectation. Visitors moved slowly, heads bowed more in reverence than curiosity. Phones stayed in pockets. Conversations dropped to murmurs. On the far wall, Silent Pines waited. A canvas of muted grief, branches etched in ash and ink snow falling diagonally across a sky that had no sun. Beneath it, a simple plaque. Rachel Whitmore, Silent Pines, 2015. Grief paints what the mouth cannot say. A single microphone stood unattended near the entrance. The gallery host, a slender man in navy with nervous hands, tapped the mic twice. It screeched, then settled. "Thank you all for being here," he said. The artist couldn't join us in person, but she's allowed her voice to stand in her place. A low hum replaced him. The playback began. Rachel's voice. Soft, unwavering, unmistakably present. I once waited for an invitation, she said. Waited to be seen. To be claimed by those who had no intention of seeing me. The audience stilled. One woman gripped the strap of her handbag tighter. A man leaned forward as if each word unraveled something in his chest. I thought silence meant erasure. I thought if they didn't say my name, I didn't have one. But silence is not absence. It's a seed. Waiting. Camille stood in the back corner, arms crossed not in defense, but to contain the rising breath in her chest. She knew this voice, knew how long it had waited. They built their house from my shadow, painted their ambitions with my grief, but truth doesn't knock. It waits behind the walls until the wind shifts. The gallery was silent. Not out of politeness, but awe. I am not asking for applause, the voice continued. I am not reclaiming fame. I am reclaiming breath. The kind I held while others spoke for me. The kind I lost in rooms where my art hung nameless. There was no crescendo. No dramatic swell. Just breath. Just Rachel taking up space that once pretended she didn't exist. When the audio faded, no one clapped at first. Not because they didn't feel it, but because applause felt too small. Then one hand clapped, then another, and another. And slowly, as if the room exhaled all at once, the applause filled the space. No cheers, no shouts. Just gratitude. Just recognition. Camille didn't join in. She closed her eyes and smiled. Across the city, Rachel sat at the edge of a hotel bed. She hadn't tuned in. She didn't need to. Her laptop remained closed. Her boots were laced. Her coat hung neatly beside her. She looked out the window where snowfall traced the corners of Manhattan rooftops, tracing lines like veins across a sleeping city. She stepped into the hallway, past the concierge without a word, and slipped into the cold night. Her path took her through the still streets where snow muted even the taxis. She paused at a billboard she hadn't intended to see. Ethan's face had once filled it, confident, curated. Now the poster was streaked with thick black paint as though a hand had dragged silence across every claim. Only one word remained legible, centered in faded red closed. Rachel stared for a moment, not in gloating, but in reflection. Then she walked on. No curtain, no speech, no encore, just breath, just the night. And this time, it was hers. In the end, the silence that once buried her became the stage upon which truth stood tallest. Justice didn't arrive with thunder, but with steady, unshakable proof that no mask can outlast the face beneath. Like the final brushstroke on a long hidden canvas, her courage filled in every erased name and every stolen color. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you felt this story resonated with you, share and leave a comment. Press 1 if you found justice served, or 2 if you think the story could have gone further.